just been reflecting on that idea that that the measure of society is how it treats its most vulnerable. And, you know, the recent child poverty report says that 1 in 6 now Australian children are living in poverty. That's a shocking statistic and a real measure of how we're treating our most vulnerable, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, Nicky. Like, it shocked me. And I work in this sector and I work in this industry and very close with our families, and yeah, I was shocked still to see that figure. The other concerning stat in that report is that it's almost 40% of sole parent families are living below the poverty line.
Wow.
And when you look at what the number of children growing up in sole parent families is huge. So I really think that should be very high on our political agendas, on the agendas in our communities, that we need to really invest in those families now, because that's going to be a really expensive problem for us as a society if we don't do something now.
Yeah. That's shocking. Nearly half of all single-parent families are living in poverty. That's shocking. That's a shocking statistic in the second wealthiest country per capita in the world.
And those families existing in suburbs and communities that we wouldn't expect usually. And we're seeing that in the research we're doing currently in Shellharbour as part of the Communities for Children program.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to hold you right there and just take a moment to let everyone know that this is Community Matters, the podcast that explores issues that are impacting our community with people making a difference. I'm Nicky Sloan. I'm CEO of Community Industry Group, and I'm coming to you today from the beautiful lands of the Dharawal people. And I'm joined today by Melissa Andrews, and Melissa is the Program Manager for Communities for Children in the Shellharbour area. And Melissa, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what Communities for Children is and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So Communities for Children is, like you said, it's a place-based program that's funded by the federal government. It's been a really long-term investment in the Shellharbour LGA. And Shellharbour is one of 52 sites across Australia that the federal government have invested in for 2 decades, just coming up to 2 decades. That investment has been happening in this community and those 51 other sites across Australia. Yeah, and I guess I've been the custodian for a couple of years now in this program, but there have been a number of really excellent custodians of the program before me that have really embedded some really strong practice and some really strong research and evidence-informed program delivery that have contributed to the kinds of success that we're seeing in the program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my old colleagues, one of my long-term friends, Tessa Parsons, started. I remember when it started, 20-odd years ago. And the thing that is really special about Communities for Children is that it targets communities where they are, where they're at, and it delivers services that are, as you said, place-based, but that really means that they're really responsive to their local community, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, and we really listen to communities. So we're led by children in this program, how well their communities are, coming around them, and how valued, safe and loved they are. By listening to children and looking at data and evidence and research, then we can really build innovative and locally designed programs that really do meet the needs.
You referred to data, and one of the really interesting things about the whole Communities for Children program is that you do produce a regular report on the state of the region's children, and that's been going on for quite some time now. So you've got some, evidence over years. What are you seeing? What trends are you seeing?
This is our fourth State of the Children report, and they've been produced every 4 to 6 years. So I think the first one was in 2011. If Tessa's listening, I'm sure she'll be shouting, correcting me. So we're able to sort of track what is happening for Shellharbour's children over a period of time and see where the trends are. There's some interesting data in this report because since the last report, which was released in 2019, we've had some real systems pressures on our children and families. So we've come out of bushfires and COVID, and we've got all of the knock-on effects of those that families are just so aware of. We're also aware of. So the cost of living pressures are huge. And housing stability and affordability is a real issue that's impacting our families. We're seeing some really interesting data for our youngest citizens. So we're children that were born during COVID, the COVID period or soon after. There's the AEDC data, so the Australian Early Childhood Development Census, which assesses children's readiness for school. Every Australian child that enters school is assessed, and it gives a really in-depth picture of where we are and where our children are. Within Shellharbour, we're looking suburb to suburb what's happening, and there's areas within Shellharbour that have had entrenched pressure. So they're communities where there's a lot of social housing, there's high unemployment, all of those sort of socio-economic pressures for families living there.
Which is really why Shellharbour was chosen initially, isn't it, for one of the 52 places to deliver communities for children.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That and the fact that it's a growing area for children. So at the time when Shellharbour was chosen, we were the fastest growing LGA for young families.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So a lot of that development has happened now, and, families have been living in those newer suburbs for, quite some time in some like Flinders. So we're able to sort of see what the patterns are there. But so the areas that have had entrenched disadvantage are still impacted, and we are still seeing the, intensified issues of cost of living in those communities. But data has remained relatively stable, and in those in the AEDC data, so for children entering school, we've actually seen some really pleasing improvements.
So that's wonderful. So I think, where people might say, oh, well, the data stayed really stable, I think that's a really important indicator, because you're right. We know through a lot of the work that we're doing that actually for many people the cost of living crisis has really escalated. And one of the things that Community Industry Group has long been advocating for is around income support for people who are unemployed, and the deplorable rate that it is currently at. So the fact that you've managed to keep it stable, I think, is a real testament to the work of Communities for Children. Yeah. And if school readiness is on the improve, well, congratulations. I mean, I think that is marvellous, particularly considering the difficulty for those families just to get day to day, really.
Absolutely, yes. So some improvements there, and interestingly, data that was taken in 2021, so during COVID, actually for those communities that are under the most pressure, children were starting school developmentally very vulnerable. So you could see that what appears to have happened is that when children weren't able to access extra supports outside the home,
Early learning.
The community, the parents, the families, networks of support because they weren't able to socialise, go to play groups, get that support from friends and family. During that time, it appears to have impacted children in those communities under pressure a lot more than children in other communities. So what we sort of saw was a dip in the data in 2021, and then it returned back to pre-COVID sort of scores or measures in 2024, which was really pleasing. But it did show a picture of, you know, how much we need those community supports and that, you know, that ecosystem around a child to combat some of those, you know, pressures that are faced within families, or that the families can't on their own meet the needs of that child, and the extra supports seem to really make a difference. So that was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the data really tells a story, but, you know, you see families every day. I mean, you're working with families all the time. Have you, like, seen the difference in families? Have you seen the difference that some of your programs have made in families?
Yes. Yeah, I have. In the 25228 postcode, so the sort of areas around the lake, there has been quite an intensive investment of programs and supports. There's a program that's been running with tweens and teens, led by Nicky from EduPlay.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's there's been more than a decade investment there, and she's worked with those that community there really holistically. So yes, the children will come to a drop-in program, and the children will do a multi-week program that culminates in an overnight camp. Some of those children have never been away from home, and they set themselves goals and they achieve these goals, and the families all come around this as well. And it's this program is connecting families. So one thing I'd probably like to share is that one of my favourite events of the year is their end of year awards night, where all the families come, they all have a meal together, and the children in those programs are celebrated. For some of them, it might be the only time they're up on stage. You know, some of them are not the children that you would normally see at the assembly getting up and receiving awards or speaking on the microphone, but they all get their chance to speak, and everyone has their achievements celebrated, big or small. The other thing we've seen through those programs is children that have come in at 8 years old, have progressed through the program. They then go on to become mentors. Nicky's very, very child-centred and whatever, looking at that cohort and what their needs might be. But they've done things like get their first aid certificate.
Right.
Even studied some, got some TAFE, certifications around things like catering and that sort of thing. Last year's event, one of the young women that had been right through these programs came back to speak, and she's been mentoring the girls. She is now well and truly in her career in real estate. She is enrolled in tertiary education. She spoke about being the first in her family to do many, many things, and really attributed it to being able to go through those programs and have the support of a network of peers, other families, but the leaders and mentors within that program.
So that points to the fact that we need these programs to be really long-term. Now, that was a long-term investment in that young woman, but how has that paid off? If she's, first in family to, I don't know, to have a job, to certainly to go to university, like that just shows the success of a long-term local place-based program. Unfortunately, in the community sector, we're very much at the mercy of funding cycles, and you mentioned that Communities for Children has been going for 20 years, but often our funding cycles are 3, at very best 5 years. And now Communities for Children is actually really under threat, is it not? Or under review, can we say?
Yeah. It is, Nicky, and it's something that we've been really putting our best foot forward to the federal government to advocate for the style of program that Communities for Children is. You know, they have made this long-term investment, and it has allowed communities like ours to innovate and really show and build this body of evidence that this is working, you know. The collaboration that happens in Communities for Children programs as well is beyond just the people coming to a program, receiving a program and walking away, you know. It's the impact radiates out from there, you know, it impacts the family. But I guess the programs that we fund, so currently there's 10 programs being funded by Communities for Children for a really small investment from the government, achieving a huge, I keep using the word web of support, but you know that's what children need.
Yes.
But if there's a gap, we know there's a gap and we fill it. If, you know, a child in one program is needing extra or targeted supports, someone from another program either picks those up or they know where to send that child. And between us, you know, we can really come around families and support and provide those really soft entry points for families as well. So, you know, by soft entry, I mean really easy to access and non-threatening programs, you know, because asking for support is hard and takes courage. I know that from my own experience as a sole parent, you know. The way that we're able to do that on a really community way, in a really, you know, grounded way in community, I think is really, really precious and something we need to preserve. So to answer your question, we are concerned about Communities for Children being under threat under the new reforms proposed by the federal government, the Department of Social Services. We're hopeful that they will listen to the feedback from us and the other 52 sites around Australia, because we have been fiercely advocating and feeding back to the federal government because we believe so strongly in what we're doing. We feel really hopeful that they will look very positively at this approach and what they've invested in for such a long time, and they won't want to lose that.
So the thing about Communities for Children, and government often talks about wanting to reduce the number of contracts. So the interesting thing about Communities for Children 20 years ago was that government contracted, in this case Barnardos Australia, to deliver Communities for Children in Shellharbour, and then Barnardos works with other organisations, local place-based organisations, to deliver those, to fund programs and deliver the programs locally.
Yeah, that's right. You know, it would make a lot of sense for the government to look at this model because it reduces the number, like you said, of contracts that they have. But the facilitating partners, so us in this case, have the local relationships, knowledge, you know, circles,
networks,
in community that allow this work to thrive. And each site has a different facilitating partner delivering, and then they hold the contracts. There's so much work in holding and coordinating 10 contracts to deliver programs locally to meet local need, you know, do the research. It's a really sound investment. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it ticks government's box in trying to reduce their administrative burden and in delivering programs that make a difference on the ground.
Yeah, and C4C's shown with 20 years of evidence that it works. Yeah,
it's a great model government. It's a great model. It's making a difference. And what we know is the level of need in our communities is growing, and so we should be growing these programs. And Melissa, I don't know if you've seen our most recent podcast is with Matt Goodenough from the Australia Institute, and Matt really points out that we could generate much better revenue in our country by targeting things like resources, rent, and wealth taxes on the very, very wealthy. We could keep these programs, we could grow these programs, and we could really be making a difference for those 1 in 6 Australian children who are living in poverty.
It makes a lot of financial sense for the government to invest early too, because I'm not an expert in social impact investment, but there are others that are, and we can track what the investment in that early intervention, cushioning families or cushioning a child, redirecting them to programs or supports that are going to stop them entering into systems where they become a financial, I don't want to use the word burden because a child is never a burden, but the financial burden on the government, if they don't invest early, is basically what it becomes.
I think you gave a beautiful example of a young woman who came from intergenerational poverty and is now at university and already is employed and is going to go on and soar. I think that is a prime example of the benefits of these kinds of programs.
Absolutely. She's perhaps the change for her own family, and she's perhaps the change for within her community, because children in some communities, you can't be what you can't see, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
she's mentoring.
Yeah.
She's helping this next generation through. It's a beautiful example.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It's a beautiful example.
Yeah.
Now, Melissa, this podcast is called Community Matters. Could you tell us about a person or people in the community that matter to you?
Our young people matter,
All young people matter.
All
absolutely.
young people matter. And there's a particular young person that's been involved in one of our youth mentoring programs. She's been involved in our Waves Resilience program, which is an incredible, innovative, locally designed program. She has become a mentor in that program. She has become a leader, and she's become, been given a paid role mentoring within that program. And this is somebody that really struggled to complete school. She's been involved in currently involved in a film project that we're working on. Just an incredible young woman that I guess hasn't had it easy and would have every reason to go, it's all too hard, and that's not for me. But I think when we're able to really see young people and really come alongside them in a way that works for them and be patient and work with them long term, they can achieve incredible things. And gosh, they're resilient, and they really inspire me. And this young woman really inspires me.
That's a lovely story of how if we really, really spend time with our most vulnerable, we can really, really change lives and give them the opportunity to thrive in their own way. And I think it's a beautiful example of the amazing work of Communities for Children. So thank you so much for being with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear about this important program and the difference that it's making. So thank you for the work that you do. And of course, we will always be behind you, advocating as well for the value of those and all place-based community programs. Thank you all for tuning in to Community Matters, the podcast that explores community issues with people who are making a difference. Please like, share, leave us a review, and tune in next time for more Community Matters.